Hi guys, on a special walkie-talkie today, just setting off on this very beautiful day to the funeral of Sinead O'Connor, and I'm going to get to Sinead's town by walking over the cliff, which is what would have been done years ago. There's a lot of traffic blockages in Bray, so I'm going to take you with me for anyone that's interested in joining this particular experience, and we will talk about narcissism in some aspects, but in a more positive light in relation to people who change the world by living their life purpose. So it's the opposite of the narcissist perspective, but we will be talking about them in due course. This was actually part of the farm on which I grew up, for anyone that is interested. So coming out the gates now, and it's the start of the journey into the next town. So guys, any of you familiar with the videos from the early days of the channel will probably recognize some of this landscape. So this is part of the journey I'm making in tribute to Sinead O'Connor and a farewell to her. She lived in the next town, which is Bray in County Wicklow, close to Dublin, south of Dublin, on the east coast of Ireland, for a good part of her life, as did Bob Geldof actually. It's strange that two such strong voices should come from such a close proximity to each other. Certainly I'll talk more about the time they grew up and I grew up in Ireland, and the circumstances in which we would have found ourselves. So heading towards Bray, and just give you a view of the town, which used to be a fishing village and is now a much bigger metropolis. Beautiful, beautiful flowers, wildflowers along the way. It's a stunning walk. For anyone that would like to know of its location, I can certainly email you if you want to email me at narcscon@gmail.com. So continue on the journey and bring you with me. If you are listening to this on a podcast, I'd strongly recommend that you take a peek at YouTube for some of the scenery to get the video appreciation of it. This is actually a walk that Sinead would have done, I'm sure, quite a number of times in her childhood or teenage years, when probably she would have come up to Bray Head with her friends. No doubt to have some kind of parties or time away from parental control. I can only imagine. Beautiful place. Children of the 60s who really were born into a very stable and conservative and probably compromising existence, in that you were expected to conform. In a way, there's a security in that, but it's very, very debilitating for any kind of individuality. Maybe we've come full circle and there's not enough stability in our communities these days, but at the time it did need someone to speak out, and Sinead had a platform to do that, and she certainly used it. Hate her or love her, you know, she was very strident in her views, but it kind of needed that strength at the time to speak out about what was a very covered up misuse, abuse of an institution in Ireland. I mean, at that time it was the Catholic Church, and Sinead was spoke very strongly against it. You know, at the time, if you can imagine, at the time it was nearly like a criminal offence, the way she spoke about the church, and it would have offended a lot of people, but it did need to be said. And if she'd said it in a less way, I don't know if it would have made as much of a difference. Look down there, guys. And this is only the beginning of the walk, so I hope to show you a lot more beautiful sights before we get to the actual funeral passage or cortege on the Strand in Bray. So essentially, we're coming around halfway now. And once we get around the cliff, we get into Bray, which was Sinead's adopted town. I believe she did, or was born further into Dublin, still on the east coast. From what I hear, quite near where Bob Geldof lived, in a place called Blackrock. You know, a lot of us are born into religions, cultures in a country, kind of barriers to breaking free, and where abuse is part of the culture nearly, because to out it is seen as going against some of the traditional beliefs or your religious beliefs, or not conforming. To show you how high up we are here at the moment, the railway track down there, the sea. So it's really important that we have people that do speak out, that abuse isn't covered up. In the 60s, if you were a 60s child in Ireland, you were born into kind of a culture that would have been about 20 years behind America. Like, it was kind of a 40s and 50s culture, certainly on the East Coast near Dublin, which would have been even more progressive. I mean, down the country, you were much more indoctrinated and less exposed to modernism. You're much more indoctrinated in the power of the clergy, the Catholic Church. So Sinead was big and bold, speaking out at a time when no one really did. It was covered up. Things were covered up. And it did come to light later, and I'm not having a particular go at any institution, at a Catholic church. I was brought up myself in it. I'm just saying there are things wrong everywhere. And when they're covered up for the sake of the community or the organisation, that's very wrong. And I'm sure there are people listening to this who are confined by their religious beliefs or the places they find themselves in, the communities they find themselves in, where to act out or to talk about what was happening would really mean your ostracisation. You're leaving everything you know behind you. I think that's why it's important to celebrate people who do speak out for us and encourage us to have a look at our situations, and particularly if you're in a narcissistically abusive relationship and you're in an environment that is going to punish you more for speaking out. You know, have a think about how short life is. Sinead, 56 years of age, has passed on. She certainly had a notable life and made a difference. It just depends on what you want to achieve, how you want to be remembered, how you want to live your life going forward. You can change your life at any point. No matter how hard it is, we all have a choice. It's just looking at the consequences of that choice and deciding whether your freedom and being able to live your life purpose freely is worth it for you in your particular circumstance. You know, Sinead was actually so different, so drastically, dramatically different in the time that she lived, I suppose, in 80s, 70s, 80s Ireland, that it made it okay for other Irish girls to be even a little different. It kind of gave that permission that she's so different and she survives, then maybe it's okay to break out a bit. She was certainly an inspiration to her fellow Irish women, myself included. I mean, what you were growing up with at the time, my father recalls, he was a bit before his time. He recalls that he was one of the first men in the locality to actually push me around as a child in a buggy, you know, in a pram, that it was not the done thing for men to do that. Can you imagine? That was the role of the woman at the time in Ireland in the 60s. You know, that was probably 15 or 20 years prior to when she did start to speak out, when she was of an age or had a platform to do so. But it wasn't that far away from the time that she made her voice heard. And it was refreshing, even though it was drastically shocking at the time. I mean, you better believe it was shocking. And people were up in arms about the way she denigrated the Catholic Church at the time. But again, if she hadn't been as vitriolic or as outspoken or as outrageous, it may not have had, it wouldn't have had such an impact. Just see a little boat heading off in the distance there. The call of the gulls. On we go, guys. We're going around that headland there, and then we will probably come upon the crowds for Sinead's funeral. So guys, ahead, I had to actually scramble up that cliff. It goes way up. So when I do come on camera later on, I'm a disgrace, covered in mud and bramble cuts. The council in their wisdom have closed the walk off halfway. So anyway, let's proceed. Where there's a will, there's a way. So straight ahead of us there, out in the headland, you can see a place called Killiney. And Killiney would lead on to a place called Dunleary and then Blackrock, and all of this coastline would have been very familiar to Sinead as she grew up. As we can see there in the distance, there's another hill, and that's called Killiney Hill, which was another place that teenagers would congregate to have some privacy and to do what teenagers do. So just showing you a little bit of the background as to the environment, the physical environment that Sinead grew up in. Now, as we continue on, we'll head around towards Bray, where the activities should be underway. Just a point of interest along the way, this was the tithe or the tax gate that was part of Lord Meade's estate. That was a local dignitary who owned a lot of land around here. The board has been scribbled on, but that's the information in relation to Lord Meade's Lodge. It says the railway company owned the walkway up to Lord Meade's Lodge, who kept the gate closed and charged a penny for entry except on Fridays. The estate house was Kilrudry House, now open to the public. Lord Meade also constructed a carriage walk around the top of Bray Head for his guests. This was also open to the public. The cliff walk was closed on Fridays when it was reserved for Lord Meade's own use. The steps above the toll house led to Lord Meade's estate. The stones for the cottage and the toll gate were all collected from the immediate area, with the exception of the granite coins and the red brick, which were brought to the site. And actually, on the other side of this hill, my family owned a farm, so it's very, very familiar territory, just to give you a little bit of background for anyone. Another point to mention there in relation to narcissism. A narcissist wouldn't have been able to control someone like Sinead. Sinead would have been too headstrong and not cowed down by a narcissist. So when you're looking at what's suitable supply for a narcissist, if you're strong and have strong opinions and strong ideas that you may compromise on, but ultimately won't bend on, you are no use to a narcissist. I mean, we all can temporarily compromise and try and, see the other person's point of view for the sake of having a relationship. But ultimately, if you remain yourself, you will be discarded by a narcissist. I mean, there are other reasons. The narcissist sees somebody better, that they think is better, or is going to give them fresh supply or bring more benefits to the table, more fiscal benefits or status, whatever the narcissist happens to feel they need at a certain point in time. But in general, your upbringing, your fundamentals, your beliefs, you hold on to them, you're no damn use to a narcissist. So for the purposes of this particular video, Sinead definitely would not have been a suitable supply for a narcissist. They would not have stuck around long. So just down below is the road. The cortege will come along the Strand Road, and we'll show you some footage of that as we go along. The coffin will come from her house, which is just at the tree point there, towards the camera, down along that road, and then turn up to the left. And just listen to the roar in the background for her. So the main reason that I'm attending Sinead O'Connor's funeral as a member of the public, as a fellow Irish countrywoman, as someone of her generation, and giving you a bit of background in relation to the environment in which she grew up, and would have shared that myself, is just to say, to resonate, or hopefully resonate with you in your own circumstance. We land on earth. We're born into a certain family, to a certain community, maybe to a certain religion, certain cultural biases, and different times, over the centuries. It's how we choose to become or develop in our lives, how we let our circumstances and environment define us, how much we will stay conformist in a circumstance that isn't serving us in order to be part of a community or part of a religion, how much we will take, on the home front in relation to abuse, how much we will not proceed on our life's path is a very personalized choice. Whether, you would be in agreement with somebody like Sinead, who stood up for what she believed in, whether you would believe she did it in the right way or the wrong way, she certainly followed her star and
She vocalised what she believed in very passionately and very strongly. So it's a choice we can all make. We don't all have the platforms, you know, to publicly announce how we feel about things. We don't need to. But each day and every action you take in life is a choice. You know, some are harder than others, but there are choices. Some have maybe dire consequences, like people living in totalitarian regimes where they will go to prison for their choices, or they will be killed for their choices, but they do have choices. So what I'm saying to you is I felt it was important to mark Sinead's passing, because she, in effect, whether you agree or disagree with her methods, gave us permission, certainly in Ireland and I believe in the world, at a time when society was very conformist, to be different and to celebrate difference. And I believe she did that in her life, for sure. So again, I'm not one to go against the stability of society, as you would probably know from past podcasts. I do believe that we need to pull together as a society, but that there should be room and acceptance for difference and individuality, and that where there is abuse, it should be spoken about. And your contribution as one single individual is not as minuscule as you may think. It does matter. It does make a difference. What you put into your existence and your life, and what you put out there on a daily basis, is part of the whole and is part of the collective, and is part of, for want of a better word, the divine intelligence of all of us. And therefore I salute and celebrate Sinead O'Connor's life and thank God for the gift of it. So thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll bid a very now fond and grateful farewell to Sinead O'Connor. Thank you.